Hello and welcome to another episode of the Things I See podcast. Today we're going to do a half episode. The next episode is a very important topic, and I want to make sure that everything goes right, not just having the right interviewer, but making sure we have the right space to discuss it. It's going to be about the comparison of empathy compared to sympathy with compassion. And that's a long rant for the next episode, of course, but for this amazing half episode, I am just going to talk about myself a bit. You know, having the name Clarity is a pretty big name to carry, some might say. So I want to give a bit of information on who I am, why I'm beyond excited to have this specific podcast, and why I think I'm a good person to host it. So to start, I'm going to start by asking my own self one of my favorite questions to ask other people, which is, who are you? But even more importantly is the question, do you know who you are? They get different responses as very different questions, but I'm asking the same thing with them. Who are you? And if you'd like a bit of inspiration on how to answer that yourself, here's my answer. I am Clarity Ray. I was born into the world as Carter Spencer by a loving mom and a loving dad. I have 6 older siblings. I'm from Idaho, from the Americas. And I am, let's see, what else am I? The question is a tough question for many people, and reasonably so. Knowing what you identify with at a very core center of yourself is very crazy, but it's good to start with where you come from. Who are you? Where do you come from? And then, what do I do? I am an energy worker, but more importantly, a spiritual guide. The name Clarity wasn't a name I picked. I did pick the name Claire, but Clarity was given to me when I was doing dance. And then, I become a spiritual guide, and it's like, wow, that worked out laughably well. But it didn't just work out laughably well for marketing reasons. Over the collection of all of my magical experience, I can only say my real gift, the one gift I have, is the gift of clarity. I just get to see things. I get to see energy within people, outside of them, within spaces, within the earth, within the sky. And I get to see just about all of it. So usually people who have the ability to just see energy, they have a pretty wacky past, so I'm going to go a bit into that past. So earlier, I described I come from a family of 7 kids. I have 6 older siblings, so I am the youngest. And as you might guess, for people with psychic abilities, I had a very phenomenal birth. My mom intentionally had 5 kids, then she had a hysterectomy. After that hysterectomy, she had my older sister, Chrissy. And after yet another hysterectomy, crazy, I know, she then gave birth to me. And when my mom dropped that story on me at the nice age of 23, she followed it up with, "You're a miracle from God." And that sat with me. Because I look at these gifts I have and I'm like, no, but literally, like, what the hell was that? It's crazy to look back and think, like, in many ways, I was a very crazy last addition to this wonderful family I got to grow up in. And while growing up, there is the outlook of, oh, I was the second accidental kid after 5 kids. I know more than anything how much my family loves me. And it's so important that even if you don't understand that love from your family, or even if you didn't see that, you love the roots nonetheless. Those roots have made me who I am, And to everyone out there, whatever your roots are, good or bad, that's part of who you are. Own it. Love it. Love who it is helping you become in this moment. So moving on from the crazy, phenomenal birth. Ever since I was a little kid, I've had a knack for seeing things out of the corner of my eye. And from ages 0 to 17, it was very largely paranoia based. I'm convinced there was actually some spirits I was seeing here and there. But for the most part, it was absolutely paranoid functioning. It's specifically tied to OCD, where every night, up until the age of 17, I would have to turn the lights off in a certain fashion. I had to make sure certain doors were closed. There were some places I couldn't look because I would see something there. And if I saw it, that was an issue. And that just goes into the OCD end, where it's a compulsion. More than it was just fear, it was, I have to do this or else. And that or else is never specified. In fact, at some point, around age 15, 16, before it just stopped completely, I started taking control of it. I started just kind of not caring. I was so tired of living my life on such a routine. I started owning it to those spirits and ghosts and really showing it to them. And it's crazy because that absolutely carried over from what was paranoid delusions to actual spirits I've interacted with. Ghosts don't fuck with me, but it's because they know I ain't fucking with them. And it took, well over a decade of being in fear of these external sources that have made me so able and ready to confront them these days. And don't get me wrong, when it comes to entities and spirits, I've come across some pretty gnarly ones. But I know danger when I sense it. There are many things I have avoided within a few feet of coming into contact, where you can just tell right away deep down, oh, I am not supposed to be fucking with this. This is a step in the wrong direction that I am not taking. So, from birth, I had a very, very weird, phenomenal birth. I most certainly have a lot of mental health, definitely more than a lot of people in my family, but all of that first 17 years ended with a specific therapist who guided me through hypnosis, which it's funny that I do hypnosis nowadays because it absolutely got that whole train started. He helped me find what appeared to be a green seed in my mind. And he helped me, in a way, pull it out. Well, he himself pulled it out, It was pretty phenomenal hypnosis, truthfully. And all of that paranoia vanished. But then a few months after that, I had my first psychotic episode at age 17. And funny enough, the psychotic episode was triggered by an actual spirit. I don't know the full details of this spirit or why it picked me, but I could tell it was something definitely outside of my own self. It was definitely something. And I could also tell because then through having a psychotic episode, it didn't feel like any of the hallucinations. Where with the hallucinations I would get when I was very young, I could tell, I can't remove the fear from it, but to some degree I could tell, hey, this likely isn't real. More likely than not, this isn't actually happening to me, but whatever. And that psychotic episode is absolutely what set me up to start diving into the deeper realms of my own mind. So after that psychotic episode, as it's not very unexpected, I turn 18, I graduate, I transition that year. I decide to get into dance that year after not having danced a step in my life. I didn't bring it up earlier. I was raised in a Mormon family, so religious practice, prayer, a lot of this stuff has been a very loud, consistent theme through a lot of my life. Symbology has always been huge. But as I hit 18 is when I start exploring drugs. My prominent one being for 2 years, 18, 19, and a bit into my 20s, was LSD. And this was the craziest rabbit hole I've ever been down, where it was, in a way, all just because. It was this long 2-year hunt for the answer to everything. Why am I here? How's this supposed to make sense? And after 2 years, I quickly find out, swiftly from the LSD, it gives me a very blunt and direct answer, that the answer is there is no answer. It's about finding peace and acceptance with the lack of conclusion, with the lack of answers, because there is no definitive anything. There is only the transition to it and out of it. As soon as we find our definitive point, as soon as we achieve a goal, the second we get there, we're already walking away from it. Just as soon as we got it. So, looking at ages 20 and back, my life was pretty dark. I lived a pretty harsh life. Between the psychosis, the seeing things, the drug abuse to cope with it for a few years after. But all of this wasn't all that there was to my life. There was a major flip side to what was a very hurt mind for a long time. And that flip side was just art. My entire life, I've had a brain that just completely revolves around endless creative brainstorming. Every art project, before I even get within a few feet of it, I've already thought about more than I could explain. It all started with drawing. Drawing is such a fundamental skill. I think every single person on earth should put more time into drawing, because it's one of those skills that will make you better at every single other skill in your life. And I got super into illustration, doing drawing, but with pens. And that kept going, but I hit a major wall, specifically when I turned 18. It's like I had freedom at 18, but I got consumed by drugs too, and dance. Truthfully, I burnt out of drawing a bit, but it wasn't the type of art I needed in my life. It was just the one I had available. And I am so grateful, because every hour I spent drawing has completely changed the way I've moved across every other creative skill. And to follow up drawing, I started doing graphic design in 2014. Before I graduated high school, I finished 2 internships. I was way ahead of it, way on top of it. My favorite thing to do was web design. But the base core of what really drove me kind of off my rocker with graphic design was symbology, iconography. The idea of meaning in such clean, simple shapes. My favorite book I probably own is The Dictionary of Symbols. I look through it all the time. And I've looked through every single page, and there's still some things I've missed, even after looking through every single page of that 400 plus page dictionary. And the reason I bring these up is these are all precursors. Art, the ability to visualize, the ability to put thoughts into action or into image are such core traits of what have made me who I am today. And I'll especially get into graphic design especially. I think more than anything, graphic design has guided my ability to see energy more than any other skill I have. So I, at this current moment, still do graphic design quite often. So I have 8 years of graphic design experience, just rolling with it. And when I turned 18, part of it was getting into raving and partying, The dance style I started with is one called gloving. Many of you might have heard of it, and if you haven't, I highly recommend you check it out. It's quite spectacular. It is the only form of dance that is purely for one person. It's not to an audience. It is a love message you write to the person you're performing it for. And that is something beyond special that I don't think the art form gets enough credit for. It is so personal and so important. And it's also a little bit autistic. And I say that absolutely with love. It's a quiet dance form in a way. You get to start quiet. It's not supposed to be in front of a crowd or an audience. It's for you and one other person if you want it to be. For me, it was mostly for me, across the board. And this is what really helped me understand who I am, how I choose to express. Dance was... I can't even put it into words. I dance every day and have danced every single day of my life since I started. There hasn't been a single day where dancing wasn't the thing I absolutely wanted to do. And that evolved really fast, where if you'd like to see my dance nowadays, it's not on this YouTube channel, but I do have a YouTube channel. I believe it's under the name right now, Luminary Clarity. Definitely check it out. It's something called tutting. And this will go into the metaphysical stuff very heavily. But as I was doing a lot of LSD and doing a lot of tutting, it's based on something called grid work. And with this grid work, I've discovered an entire dimension called the grid. There's the individual grid space that people have, and it is basically a memory bank for each lifetime. And this memory bank is just a giant infinite grid where each point you can basically store data on each and every point using polygons, like bits. It's really crazy, and I'll likely do a guided meditation to help people find this space, but it all started with dance. This dance form of following the grid all starts with the human body. Our entire body is perfectly measured out with a hand length. If you go to my website and look at how I organize the human energy body, you'll notice that I have a hand on the poster that matches the size of the hand represented for that human. And the really kick-ass thing is, I show people all the time, not only does our hand perfectly measure out where our organs are, fun little word string, not only can our hands measure out precisely where our organs are, they measure out every point of our energy body to the exact center. Everything is either a full hand length or a half hand length away. Every single thing. And you can perfectly measure down the whole body from that upper star point, a half hand down to the crown, another half to the third eye, a full hand down to the throat, and further down. So, while this is a dance form, I have found a side to it that is so unbelievably sacred, where it's literally dancing along the axes of the body, of the energy, of the organs, of every single part of the self, understanding where the self is. And even without the energetic understanding, dance is unbelievably spiritual. A lot of people need a dance just for the sake of dancing, not just for health reasons, but spiritual health too. Like, it is so beneficial to know your body, to feel it, to be engaged in it, because that engagement changes everything about the world around you and how engaged you're willing to be with it. Changes how engaged you believe you can be with the world. It changes how you get to choose who you are, with how you express, with how you hold yourself. So dance is phenomenal, and with tutting especially, it is sacred in so many beautiful ways. And when it comes to developing visual abilities, I originally started when I was in high school, because I noticed with my eyes closed, I was able to see somewhat. It was just very unstable. Shapes were not consistent. I could get color consistently, maybe texture consistently, but something about shape just wasn't quite right. So going into tutting, where you're just making boxes out of your body, which is all formed on a grid, the incredibly cool thing about it is my visual ability skyrocketed through working with this grid, where you can get your body to feel like there's a line, there's a wall somewhere, and you can feel it with your own nerves, or with your eyes closed, you can see the wall that you're pressing against. You can see every point, every line, and every plane that creates what is the grid. And the obsession with dance is what drove my obsession with visualization. I became a better dancer by doing it, which was always nice, but it was like my own little world, truly. It was no longer just trying to explain what my world might look like with this dance form, but I could see it myself, and I knew exactly how I intended to replicate it, with absolute clarity and with absolute precision. And I won't lie, the LSD absolutely helped with this. The visualization. LSD can be put to use spiritually in a really good way, but I do always like to remind people it is still a drug. The toll it takes on the adrenal glands and the toll it takes on your body and your brain is very intense if it's not treated with the right respect and the right intent. And to continue where I left off, at the age of 20, I was drug dealing for a bit. Didn't say that. But after that, I hit a burnout. My body became so incapable of regulating itself. And a big part of it, while it was chemical, sure, was my adrenal glands. They didn't know when to send energy where for what, because acid fried them out. You know, it absolutely fried it out. And I spent the next few years in an incredibly, incredibly deep depression. Very, very deep. And through this time, I was with someone who wasn't very good for me, and I still had yet to even know what tarot was. I still had yet to fully even understand what all of this was for. Because everything I've described is all for the purpose of what I'm experiencing right now. All of the art, all of the dance, and all of the connection, while it was for those reasons, all of those reasons were for a much, much higher purpose I had not yet connected to. So, through my dance adventures, starting at 18, I also had a mentor. This is who I looked up to in dance. They got it. They saw it in the same sacred light that I understood right off the bat I was supposed to start understanding. Their name was Sona Octavia. And this beautiful human I love dearly to death is also who got me into the spiritual aspect of everything. And it was so crazy to have a mentor not just for dance, but for everything spirit as well. They made things that made no sense suddenly start making sense. And it was maybe a few years after just us doing spiritual rambling, them teaching me when I was confused, that they bring up the occult. They're like, you know what the occult is, right? And I miraculously had no fucking clue. And they described it very simply as the unknown. And that made me have even less of a clue. But at that point, learning that one definition, it all started cascading. After I turned 20 and went through around 2 years of an extremely depressive phase, I received my very first tarot reading of my entire life. And this tarot reading was a 17 card read, I believe. It was like a crazy high number. I believe it was called a pike reading or a knife reading, something along those lines. It was with a Native American deck from this person's grandma. And it just detailed out my entire life, who I need to look to be, what my purpose is, who I was, and who I'm becoming. And within the week, I bought my own tarot deck, and it is by far my favorite tarot deck. It is the Inversion Tarot, based off the Marseille Tarot, which I believe is Italian traditionally. It's just black and white, has very strong reversals. And this deck currently has over 1,000 readings in it. All very beautiful readings. I currently avoid using the deck a bit because I'm saving it. It is missing one card, but it was very, very, very important that that card went missing. So it's good. It can tell me whatever that card was supposed to tell me, and however many other cards available it has to. Not a single bent card in that deck. It is my love and joy. But it didn't start out with 1,000 readings. I brought it brand new. And leading up to it, it's crazy how obsessed I got with it pretty instantly. I could tell it was a big undertaking to learn tarot, how I knew I wanted to learn it, where I just knew it like the back of my hand, knew it like the language that it is. And what I decided to do, I decided to build a desk, bring it into the downtown of where I live, downtown Boise, and I just set up shop. I had a sign that said free readings because I was new, I was beginning. And for the next year and a half, I would regularly go down and perform. I would do tarot. I would do it for free. And I quickly realized how incredible not only tarot is, but what I'm doing. How meaningful, how absolutely important to be able to change someone's life for the better on an absolute whim. It still baffles me today that this is what I do, but especially then, it quickly unfolded into what was an absolutely incredible journey. So around this time that I started going downtown, I am starting to get a message from a higher source. I would meditate, I would focus in, and then boom, I'd get a flash of white light saying, "You're not doing it right." And it made me salty. I was a little butthurt because I could tell something big was trying to connect to me. The person who gave me my first tarot reading was able to tip me off. Very impressively so, too. They guessed spot on. They said it sounds like that could be something like Metatron. I believe they even had an Archangel deck and we pulled from it, and it pulled the Michael card. And it described the flash of white light in meditation, and I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? I built an altar, I tried all of these things. Then I realized it was the house I was doing it in. I was just doing it in some random suburbs, in some random house. So I went out into the desert. Picked a random point south of Boise where it gets a bit more deserty, a bit more dirty, a bit more flat. And my finger lands on a place called Insignia Road. And across this road, there is a hill called Signature Point. And I'm like, looks like that's where I'm supposed to be. So I go down. It's around, I want to say 45 minutes at the very most to get to this point. And I pull my car up, and as I'm there, the wind is, there's wind, and I roll my window down. I'm hanging out for a few minutes because I'm like, it doesn't feel right yet. And I think to myself, how am I supposed to know? And within a few seconds of that clear, defined thought, the wind cuts out completely. And I'm like, oh, well, I think that's my sign. So I hop out of my car. I bring the few gems I had. I bring my tarot cards. And I walk up this hill. And holy shit, still to this day, out of all the incredible experiences I've had, this one by far is one of the most nuts, dramatic, and insane moments of my spiritual journey. I'm walking up the hill, and as I'm walking up this hill, the wind starts picking up. Clouds just form over the sky, and it was already late, but it got dark, and it got dark fast. And as I'm walking up this hill, in a full 360 degrees around me, lightning starts firing. I did not hear a single thunder strike at all, not a single clap of thunder. But the whole time, in almost what seemed like a perfect mile radius, there's lightning in all directions, firing like crazy. And I'm making my way up this hill, and I get to the top. I pull a few cards, and I believe there was the Empress and the Page of Pentacles. And I know the Page of Pentacles was one of the cards because it is the one card missing from my tarot deck. It blew away. The wind was crazy, and it was very important for me to look into the meaning of that card at that moment. But I go up this hill, and I do a meditation called the Microcosmic Orbit. It is part of Taoist healing, which I was very invested into at that time. So I sit down, and I run through the Microcosmic Orbit 3 times, and on that 3rd time, I gather all of the energy in all of my body. And mind you, through this whole process, I am also doing some rigorous grounding. Visually, I can not just see, I can feel roots extending down this hill. And mind you, this hill is the only hill this tall in miles and miles. I am at the tallest point, and it was like a 5-minute walk up the hill. It's not the biggest hill, but it's big enough, and I could feel my roots reach all the way to the bottom of it and just completely consume this entire hill. And as the roots completely ground as far as they can possibly go, and as I run my microcosmic orbit through that 3rd meditation, I collect all that energy in my body, and as it lines up to my adrenal gateway, as it's called in Taoist practice, I use my hands and I push 100% of that energy into my adrenal glands. And just like that, I am somewhere completely different. I am in an absolute blank space, but in front of me is Metatron himself. I have a drawing from right after this event because it was so profound and so extraordinary. A very masculine figure. He is very directly a masculine deity. Didn't have a head exactly. It was kind of just morphing geometry and eyes. Wasn't wearing a whole lot of clothing either. But his hands were in an extremely specific shape. He was holding an hourglass, and he was holding it where his hands are on the top and bottom, and his arms were exactly 60-degree angles. 120-degree angles from his hands. Basically, he was drawing out a hexagon with his arms while holding this hourglass. And this hourglass was a gift, an incredibly important gift to me. I'm looking closer and closer at this hourglass. One of the ends has maybe a tiny amount of sand in, but it's not draining through. It's draining, it's going to the other side, but it's like the grains of sand multiply themselves as they go through. It's just time distortion. The sand is moving faster than the time is actually moving. This hourglass, to this day, is such an important symbol, not just for Metatron, but also for me. It is the idea that there is no one point of balance. There is going one way or the other. There is awakening or grounding, and we have to pick one and enjoy the journey on the way. Balance is found in healthily bouncing back, not finding the extremes of either side, but having a healthy amount of both, knowing when it's your time to ebb or when it's your time to flow. And I could feel this hourglass specifically at my third eye. And it's at everyone's third eye. There's a lot of work I do where I flip people's hourglass. They find themselves stuck in limbo before their next phase of life begins. And I help kick that phase a bit into action with this hourglass. It is such an extraordinary gift. And to add on to the symbology of it, when you have two triangles with the tips meeting to make an hourglass, that is a hexagon. You have a perfect hexagon. All the angles within it are the same, and there's 6 points, and you can draw it with one line. Now there's an intersection, but it is still a hexagon. And there's a reason this is so significant. So Metatron is the evolution of Enoch. It is Enoch becoming Michael, becoming Metatron, which is the human understanding of God. It is God through the eyes of humanity. It is the black and white, real, physical version of what God is, where Metatron is the land or the sea or the language to understand those. God is every particle of water, every particle of light, and every particle of sand in between those 2 points that are known as land or sea, where God is symbolized by that Star of David. If you look at it from a slightly different angle, like let's say one triangle is in front of the other, and you look at it from a slightly different perspective, those triangles now line up into an hourglass. It is the separation of the two triangles that makes Metatron. It is not the everything all at once. It is the black and the white. It is the thing here and there. It is the human ability to perceive God in black and white, in real time, in the physical world. It is why we have color, and it's why that color stays the same. It is beautiful. The hourglass is so significant, and I think it should definitely be used to signify Metatron more than Metatron's cube. Metatron's cube is cool. It's angular. It has the hexagon, which is important, but the hourglass is exactly what Metatron is. It is the dissection of God. And if you look at the Kabbalah, where it begins and ends with Metatron, every archangel within that tree is just something God is, but in a definable set of black and white terms. When you put God in language, that's when you get the Kabbalah. That's when you get all these different meanings and morals and understandings of how God is. Metatron is just the beginning and end of what is the dissection of God. So, enough with that little ramble. To continue on, I had that experience, absolutely jolted by it, given this gift from my newfound guide, and I run with it. This was the most direct sign anyone could have given me. And mind you, on the drive back home from this, there is still lightning in a full 360 degrees around me. I had friends who saw this lightning. None of them recalled any thunder either. No one heard thunder, but others saw the lightning. So I go home, and I am invigorated. I am ready to dedicate my life to what I understand is spiritual practice. I keep doing the free readings. This is when I double down. During this time, I'm working a graphic design job, paying very minimal, especially for my skill level. In fact, it was a full-time job, but lucky for me, I was so good that I could finish it within 3 days instead of the full week, all of the workload. And that gave me Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to dedicate absolutely all of my time to providing free fortune readings. without ever asking for a donation, I would make hundreds every weekend. You know, not like too far into the hundreds, but like a few hundred every weekend. It was honestly the only reason I could afford to live for a long time. I could not afford to live if it weren't for free fortune reading. It was spectacular. I got really good with tarot. We're talking hundreds of readings for free, because when it's for free and it's out in a city just hanging out, and mind you, this is COVID times. In Idaho, there was no mask mandate for a lot of that. So you got people coming from the entire United States, coming to Idaho just to enjoy not wearing a mask and partying. And this was perfect. I had my setup for the next year after all of this. And I eventually got really burnt out of my job doing graphic design. I wasn't making enough money, and I made a very, very, very bold decision. With everything I had experienced with Metatron, with this guidance I knew I had, with this protection, with this, I don't know, faith. Absolute bullshit faith. I feel called suddenly to travel. I am supposed to travel doing these readings. I am supposed to go. Everything just started falling apart around me. I no longer had the job. I no longer had a place to be because I no longer had the job. It was during the cold months, so there wasn't a whole lot of ability to do fortune telling anyways, and it was moving out of the cold months, I believe in January or February, that I made the decision to actually split. And mind you, this is in a Ford Fiesta hatchback. So I removed the passenger seat. I put in a wardrobe trunk, put a bed on top of that trunk, put in a nightstand, put in a pantry box, and that was it. I was ready to go. And the only thing I would survive on for all of these travels was fortune telling for free. My first stop was Portland, and Portland was rather uneventful, but it was eventful to me for many reasons I created. The first thing I did on my travels was I decided I want to learn palmistry. So I do my tech wizard lookup to find some palmistry books, and I started on a very interesting, precarious palmistry book. It is Perrin's palmistry manuscript. I think it's called the palmistry manuscript, but it's by someone who went by the name of Perrin from the 1950s. And they even had like a whole little school set up for a while. Definitely, looking back on the book, I have my own judgments on it, but it was a great technical guide. It was very technical, more technical than it should have been for some people, but for me, that was exactly what I needed. In Portland, I gave my very first palm reading, and I had no idea what the fuck I was doing, because all I had looked at was my own palm. Even then, I was only trying to make sense of that reading through this book. I look at my first palm, and I'm like, fuck. I didn't realize how different every single hand is going to be. But man, is every hand so astronomically different, it's silly. You don't realize how many lines there are on the hand until you look at a ton of hands. And from Portland, I then headed towards the ocean. Of course, I wanted to be at the ocean. I wanted to go down that coastline. It was absolutely stunning. It was beautiful. I spent the first month or so in Portland and running down that coastline and, you know, here and there practicing my palmistry, practicing tarot, of course. And then I make it to Humboldt County. Absolutely lovely, friendly people there. From there, I follow what is known as the vortex, which every traveler ends up getting sucked up into. I went from Arcata to Chico. I believe it was Redding first before that. I might be mistaking that. It was either Chico and Redding or Redding then Chico, but let's start with Chico. Chico was a blast. Also some lovely people. And through this time, every single day, I am waking up to be a fortune teller. My all day, every day is free fortunes, or just hiking, or just exploring. There is no more sense of freedom I could have had in my life aside from these travels. So Chico was a blast, but I think the most significant shifts happened when I was in Mount Shasta in the Redding area. So of course I had to stop by Mount Shasta. I go up and there's still snow. I very quickly run into this girl named Phoenix. And absolutely lovely human. Definitely need to reach out to them again. We spend some time together. I share some mushrooms with her and do a bit of spiritual guidance while letting her play some music. Because when you're out on the streets, you don't get control of music in car speakers very often. So I was very happy to be able to provide that. And they help guide me around. They help show me where some events are and show me the ropes. There was a drum circle I got to join in on at Shasta. Absolutely wonderful energy up there when you go to the right place. And I went down the mountain to go to the local city, the nearby city at the bottom of it, Redding. And I would go back up to Shasta because Phoenix left her bag in my car, and I didn't notice till I got down to Redding. Mind you, doing free fortunes, gas money was coming only when it was coming, only when it had to. So I decide, how am I going to figure this money out in Redding? And I notice there's a fair. So I pull up my car. I open the trunk. Mind you, I would have signs hanging off my trunk door. And I would just be sitting in the back of my car offering free readings. That town definitely had a lot of people who were a bit speculative of fortune telling, which totally fair. You find that in many towns. Fun fact, the small towns were actually the kindest about fortune telling. It was in the towns where there was only locals and people weren't so consumed within their daily lives that I would get the most people. Like, I would sit outside a town with 500 people. I'd sit outside the grocer, and I would get 3 people within one day coming up to me for a reading. And all of them had extraordinary value. But going back to the fair, I am playing some soft music from my car, but silly old me forgot that you need your car on for it to make energy, and it will die using the stereo. I totally thought I could just play it for a bit, but it definitely killed my car, so I walked into the fair to be like, hey, does anyone have jumper cables? And I happened to run into a group of 7 people who are with a local cult. It is called the Church of Bethel. And mind you, just stepping foot in Redding, my friend there and everyone I met there, everyone who talked to me, told me to be careful of these people. None of them assumed I was those people. Or if they did, that's why they didn't talk to me. But everyone who came up to me and could tell I had good vibes, they told me, be careful. Be careful of these people. And, oh my goodness, I know why I was supposed to be careful of them. One of them walks up to me and is like, do you want to see heaven? And mind you, everything they say is like awfully, weirdly fake optimistic, really unsettling, almost drone-like. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm protected. This whole time I'm working one-on-one with Metatron. I am protected, I am comforted, I am in good hands. I hold their hands. And, oh my goodness, I have never seen... It was just false God. It was something imitating God. It clearly wasn't, but it was clearly trying to look like it. And it was kind of extremely unsettling. So me and these people are talking because I want to find out more. Part of my job on this was to learn through my travels. And they're just talking about so much of it, and it's not getting better. You know, they didn't bring up they're trying to resurrect the dead thing, but that's stuff they were trying to do. But as they're talking to me, I didn't like making eye contact with them. It made me extremely uncomfy. I'm looking at their third eye, right? It's just to avoid eye contact, but then suddenly I see a blue cross form over their face. And I've done enough inner alchemy on myself to know that, oh yeah, this is not right. It's supposed to be a circle. This is where we hold our ego and our thoughts. It's our thought space. It's our identity. What's up with this cross? I look at them and I'm like, hey, I kind of stop them in their tracks too. Why is there a blue cross here? Your third eye is not supposed to be like that. And one of them says, oh, that's how we initiate with Christ to become him, so we can perform what he does. We can do the magic Jesus did. And they draw it out with their hands perfectly. And they explain that the initiation into this cult was to draw this cross with holy water across their face. And mind you, this is where we hold our free thoughts, our ego, our identity, who we are. These people were no longer them. Something was controlling them, and it was so unsettling. And at that moment, when it all clicked, the severity of what this entity was, I just said, especially seeing it energetically, I left. And as I walk back to my car, I'm chanting, false God, false God, false God, false God, false God, like warding it away any way I can, because it was such an uncomfy thing to see. But this is the point where I developed the ability to read energy. I can now look at someone and see their energy, and that was proof of it. And I was like, okay, let's go. I make my way back up to Shasta, have an incredible time. I ended up hiking to the third tallest peak. This is where I really got good at conversing with nature spirits. The roads that led up to that area opened the night before. I was one of the first people to get there. There was not a single other person who had made it up to that peak before that season, like since the previous year. Mind you, it's like 7 feet of snow. I don't have snowshoes, but I do have a hiking stick. And for many parts of it, I was climbing up in the ice with this hiking stick. But the entire hike, as I sing, the mountain, the spirit of it, the spirits, it's like a choir, would sing back. And as they would sing to me, I would repeat it back. And as I got to that third tallest peak, I did an entire dance performance for the spirit up there. Absolutely unimaginably beautiful. I'm not huge about taking pictures through sacred moments, but I did take a picture of me on the third tallest peak, or a video showing the first tallest and second tallest and like how far I got. And mind you, yeah, I was the first one to put footprints up in there. And funny enough, people were following my footprints thinking someone knew where they were going. I didn't. But I was able to give them fortune readings on Mount Shasta. It was 3 men, and it was quite special. I make my way down, and the way down was significantly harder than the way up. I barely knew where I was going, but I make my way down, back into my car, and that is when my travels got a little funky. I decided from here I wanted to go... they didn't get funky quite yet. I went to Nevada City. Nevada City was incredible. I'll have to probably make an entire episode about Nevada City because it goes into so many skills I learned. Like breath work, controlling the flow of spaces and living things in the spaces by convincing them through energy. It's not convincing people, it's convincing the energy to move, which then convinces people to move. It was quite extraordinary. I met a Kambo administrator, and while I didn't do this frog medicine there, he introduced me to Hape. And Hape has been a very significant medicine in my life since that point. And there's a beautiful kava bar there that's so filled with community. There's people from there I still talk to, and easily some of the most beautiful fortunes I could have ever done. So Nevada City was extremely impactful. So much so that, like, in those 3 weeks, I would have to make a whole episode about those 3 weeks because they were so nuts. That is by far the biggest vortex I saw. After this, I made the decision to go to San Fran, and this certainly wasn't a mistake. Was it questionable? Yes. Was there a lot of sketchy things that happened? Yes. And then from there, where did I go? I went to Vegas. And I think these places were so important because no one wanted fortunes there. No one wanted free fortunes. People don't trust free fortunes in California and Vegas and San Fran specifically. Of course they wouldn't. I don't blame them for not trusting that at all. It's just the environment they've grown up in. And I think it was super important for me to go to those places because this is where I started really fine-tuning how I can pick up on people's energy, even though people weren't getting readings. Because I wasn't ready to do readings energetically yet. Not at all. But I was ready to start studying. And truthfully, I had to study in the grime and darkness of it all. I had to study in what was a concrete pit of some dark shit. And I did. I was able to see some incredible things. In San Fran, I was able to tell someone, hey, if you don't slow down, you're going to die of a heart attack because of stress. I was able to spread some incredible messages through those times. But a lot of that was for me to understand my place in the world by seeing the not good. The first bit of travels were all so magical, so insanely pure. But I had to make purity in those parts. I had to bring my light with me. I had to be the light where there wasn't other light sources. And that taught me a lot about freedom. You're free to be anywhere. Where do you want to be? And after Vegas, I completely was ready to head back home. I went back to Boise, and I still lived in my car for a while. And this was all 6 months of time. I might even do another episode describing more about these travels, because that was just describing how I came across my abilities here. Palmistry, energy reading, all of this. And I really couldn't see energy until I started reading it on people. Till I did enough alchemy within myself to then do alchemy in others to then see the alchemy of energy itself. So I come back to Boise. The travels left me a little ragged. I sacrificed a lot of convenience to make those travels happen. I sacrificed a lot of freedom in other ways to be free in that way. And there was a lot of recovery. A lot of recovery from that. In fact, I'm just now in my life getting over that recovery. The goal of my travels was to find grounding, and I found grounding through connecting, but not through stability, and that was the next step. Connecting to the stability and then wanting the stability and working for it in the hard labor. But a lot of that hard labor happened over time. There was a point in time I was staying with my parents, loved them to death. Point in time after that where I moved up into the mountains for a winter. And mind you, this most recent last winter, in 2023, I went through another psychotic episode. I had quite a strong hold on this psychotic episode. I was doing quite well, but it was sending everything energetically off the charts. A bit before this is when I got a download for what is the Free Flow energy system, which is the energy system I've designed and use for everybody. It's how I see energy, and it's how I think others should be able to see energy because of its therapeutic ability. It is absolutely outstanding. And it took months to start really fine-tuning it by studying it on others, but after I kind of had it down, I hit this point where suddenly, lo and behold, I see it on everyone. I'm psychotic. I can't turn it off. It is so overwhelming, and I feel like I'm losing it. I start seeing energy in every single way it can possibly be seen, and it is overwhelming at this time because I'm going through psychosis. Through this time, I am still very empathic, and I don't know how to healthily disconnect. Little did I know, all those travels of finding connection and grounding left me so connected, I forgot what detachment was. I forgot about all of that part. And it's only until now that I realize I am able to just leave it on. I'm not fighting my vision on it. I'm just letting it happen. And from being able to see people's bodies, energy bodies, through that psychotic episode, there's a few other things I start developing. This is where graphic design heavily comes into play as well. Aside from my obsession with symbology playing hugely in my understanding of tarot, I started developing other things to read on people using meters. It's like everything was in a graphic design program and I could design entire systems to understand people with. Right next to someone's head, I have a paranoia meter. At some point, the meter fills up, not all the way fills up, but when it's like halfway full, the body naturally starts leaking the paranoia out into the world. And I'm now able to see that paranoia as people leak it out, and I'm able to see how people absorb it. I developed the ability to see people's guides, especially when they are very close or trying to get in contact with them. Their guide will be standing right behind them. And I can see them as a full figure right there. I can see other people's guides, even if they're not that close, just with a bit of channeling. I eventually funnel this into past life readings, which I can now do. And I keep funneling all of this into more and more and more. And I used to just call myself a fortune teller, but that quickly was not the right term. I can see energy at every level. I can see people's past lives. I can see their inner dimensions. I can now astral project to outer dimensions and internal dimensions inside people. The work I was learning to do was so far beyond just fortune telling. I call myself a spiritual guide these days, but all in all, the only thing I can say I truly am is I am clarity. I am the thing that sees everything. And it's just cascaded from there exponentially. I can just keep channeling, keep seeing, keep developing new ways to channel. And I am so happy to be able to start this podcast for that reason. Many people see things in many different ways, especially when it comes to spirits and the dead. A lot of mediums can't turn that off yet without knowing that they need a want to use it to be able to control when they don't use it, stuff like that. There's all these things that, people can see, and I want to hear how they see them. Because my world is constantly lit up with the things I see. And it is a world full of magic. It is a world full of wonder. It is a world full of rapidly moving energy that it is an absolute treat I get to see every single day of my life. And that's where it is. I want people to not just believe me or believe in energy. I want them to be able to explore this magic as well. Whether it's because of how I describe how I see things, or it's how other people describe how they see things. It is truly a blessing to be clarity and to describe the things I see to others, because it is what has made life so beautiful and magical to me. So that is the journey that I have been through to get to the point where I can just see it. I just know it. I can tell what's a judgment in my mind or a truth. I can tell because of self-love, patience, awareness of self and others. And to extend a bit on this all being one big mirror from the last episode, I am grateful for the mirror I've been handed. I am grateful for the mirror I've worked through, because it is nothing short of magic, and I know everyone can find some level of that magic in them. There's always a demand within spirituality for the ego to own its spiritual self, to own what it's observing, to own what it's processing and doing and understanding. But the beautiful thing is, once you remove that, you just get to see it all. It isn't what I see, it is that I get to see it. It isn't my power, it's that I get to have the power to use. And a lot of people think it's special to see this. It is. I had a very phenomenal birth. I had a very phenomenal journey. But to some degree, everyone has this experience. We are all here to feel, we are all here to sense, and we are all here to get in tune. And no matter how you get in tune, it is the right way as long as you are getting into it. I'm excited for next week's episode. I'm hoping for a very exciting guest to talk about empathy with me and how it can be seen, whether outside in the world or internally. Thank you if you've made it this far into this episode. It is a half episode, despite being well long and full length. It's just a little interjection of who the host is of this show. And I'm excited to be able to talk more about my journeys in greater depth and detail in other episodes, or as time goes on, maybe in full episodes just about it. But thank you. Thank you for listening to me and the things I see. I hope you have an absolutely marvelous day. Bye-bye.